Hello everyone, my name is Amanda. I make motherhood and lifestyle videos here. I recently gave birth to my baby boy. He is 3 months old now, which is very exciting. And I've been getting a lot of questions about the differences of birthing at a hospital versus a birth center versus birthing at home. So the three main places that people give birth. I'm here to talk a little bit about the pros and cons of each of those places, and also, just as a preface, I am not a medical professional in any way. I am not a birth worker. I do not work in the birth or medical field at all. Just a disclaimer, this is just from my personal experience and educating myself throughout my pregnancy, what I've learned, and how I was able to come to the decision of what I wanted to do for my birth as well. This is just the research that I did, and I thought it would be helpful to share in this video. So I want to talk a little bit about the three different places you can give birth. So one is a hospital. I would definitely say this is the most common way and place that people give birth. It's the standard way. It's what's been done for many years, hundreds of years. Well, I guess not hundreds of years because people used to birth at home, but it's been what's done. It's what's considered normal in our Western society, is birthing at a hospital. Hospitals have different ways to birth. You can birth with a midwifery at a hospital, so that's with a team of midwives, or you can birth with an OB/GYN in just the general labor and delivery birthing suites. So there is that difference as well in hospitals. And then you have birthing centers. So birthing centers, typically you have midwives working there, and it's privately owned. It is typically just a standalone building. It is not a hospital necessarily, and they can do small intervention work. The third option is a home birth. And at a home birth, you can pretty much do whatever you want. You can have zero planning, or you can have everything planned out. I definitely wouldn't recommend going with zero planning. If you are going to be birthing at home, I would definitely recommend hiring a midwife and a doula. And just as a precaution, a midwife is a medical professional. A doula is not. A doula is more of an emotional support professional. So I would definitely look into hiring those people if you are choosing to birth at home. The pros and cons of each of those, both a hospital, a birthing center, and birthing at home, because they all do have their advantages, and they all have some things that would cause them to be a little bit more difficult, or why someone would choose somewhere else. So the first place I want to talk about is actually a hospital, and I have my notes right here, so if you see me looking, that is why. An advantage of being at a hospital is that a lot of people consider it a lot safer. So whatever that means is that if something goes wrong, or if there is a complication, you have potentially surgeons or different people who would be on call in order to assist you and help you in whatever you're doing. A lot of people believe that hospitals are much safer than a birthing center or birthing at home, because you have access to a lot more medical care at a hospital. Also, something that would be a benefit to hospitals as well would be an easier time with dealing with your insurance. So I have a couple of friends actually, who have birthed at birthing centers, and I know they had a little bit difficulty with their insurance, or they've had to have specific insurance which will qualify or allow them to birth at a birthing center. And same thing at home, if they're hiring a midwife or a doula, sometimes there can be insurance issues that are a little bit trickier with going with a birthing center or birthing at home. So that's definitely an advantage of birthing at a hospital, is usually you have a smoother transition and an easier time dealing with insurance companies. I'm in the US, so I just wanted to clarify that as well. We do have medical insurance here in the US. I'm not quite sure how it is in other countries, but I know that in the US, typically insurance companies, as of right now, are easier to work with in regards to birthing at a hospital as opposed to a birth center or birthing at home. I know that insurance companies have made a lot of progress with working with birthing centers and birthing at home in recent years, but it's definitely something I would check with your insurance company. You don't want to get you don't want to plan a birth center, plan to birth at a birth center or plan to birth at home and then not be able to insurance. So definitely clarify that with them before you make any of your final plans. So another advantage of being at a hospital, and some people would see this as an advantage or some people could see this as a disadvantage. So you can have as little or as much monitoring as you like, and that can look like temperature checks, that can look like blood pressure checks, that can look like heart rate checks, or if you have other pre-existing conditions that your medical team or birth team is concerned about going into your labor or going into your delivery, then you would have different monitoring at a hospital. And you can have as little or as much as this as you like. So for my birth, I actually chose to birth at a hospital with a midwifery team. It was just the simplest, easiest way for me to do that. I thought about birthing at a birthing center, by the time that I kind of considered doing that, it was just a little bit too late. I didn't know that that was an option for me at the beginning of my pregnancy, and I didn't want to change it. I love the team that I had at my hospital. So I chose to birth at a hospital, but I also declined a lot of the monitoring methods that they would use. So I declined having an IV in my arm, and you can either have it in your arm or your hand at most hospitals. I declined that because I didn't think anything was going to be wrong. It's more of an emergency thing for them to have an IV in if you get super dehydrated, or if they need to pump you full of fluids, or if you are planning an unmedicated birth and then decide to go to like an epidural or something last minute. They sometimes will put an IV in you. I knew that I was really good about hydrating myself, and I knew that an epidural wasn't something that I wanted, so I actually declined having an IV in my arm, and that was mostly for comfort. I knew I was already going to be in a lot of discomfort in labor, so I didn't want to have a needle in my arm or in my hand, just causing further discomfort, and I didn't want to have to worry about it like ripping out if I was like in different positions or whatever, so I declined that. And I also declined the belly fetal monitoring. They still did use the handheld monitor to monitor baby, and that's just to make sure baby's heart rate is okay as you're going through labor, and as you're delivering baby. They just want to make sure that he's okay. So you can kind of choose what level of monitoring you would like at a hospital. Okay, so we just took a brief intermission. This little man woke up from his nap, so I just fed him and changed him really quick. But I do want to just film this right now, just because I have everything ready. So we're just gonna roll with it, rock with it, and if I have to pause, you're never actually gonna really know. So here we go. Okay, so one thing that the hospital did catch is he actually had jaundice when he was born, and it is kind of common. It's not unusual in babies, but he actually had to end up being admitted into the NICU, and they told us when we were in the hospital that if they had not caught it, he would have had permanent brain damage. So that is something that terrified me, and one reason that I am so glad that we did go with a hospital is because they were able to catch the jaundice, and we were able to have some treatment while we were recovering in labor and delivery, and he was also able to be admitted into the NICU at our hospital and was able to get the help that he needed. I'm not quite sure how that would have worked. I'm not sure if you're birthing at home, if your midwife would test for certain things, or if you're birthing at a birthing center, if they would test for certain things, but that's definitely a question I would ask if they do like routine testing before they release you from there. And just to make sure, you never wanted to just something to go unchecked. So I just ask them what their procedure is, what they check for in babies, and just have that conversation with them. That way it is an open dialogue. I want to talk a little bit about cons of hospitals. So they are, at least right now in COVID, in this pandemic, they are a lot more restrictive, at least from what I have seen, than a birth center or birthing at home. So they're restrictive in the sense of who they allow into labor and delivery and recovery. So when I was in the hospital, we weren't allowed to have any visitors at all. I actually personally enjoyed this. I don't think I would have wanted people to come in and to see baby and to see me. I had a very emotional process, an emotional journey, just with recovery and just with him being admitted into the NICU. And I don't think I would have wanted people there. That was a very, very intimate space for me and my husband. We did have FaceTimes and phone conversations with them, but they last 5-10 minutes and then you can hang up the phone. They're not there for an extended amount of time. So that is something to consider if you do want people to be able to visit you at the hospital. I would definitely check their COVID procedures and just that right now as well. In addition to people visiting you, the only regret I have about this birth is not having a birth photographer specifically. I know if I had chosen to birth at a birthing center, or if I had chosen to birth at home, I would have been able to have a birth photographer come and take pictures and just get those really cool action shots of just like first time seeing your baby. And those that those are shots that, you know, I will never be able to get back again. I'm never gonna have the second opportunity to see my firstborn son. So that is something that I wish that I could have had at the hospital, but I wouldn't have changed anything that I would have done in my birth plan, just because of a photographer, even though I really missed that moment in those times. So if having a birth photographer if having a birth photographer there is important to you, definitely check your hospital's procedures or your birth center's procedures on just allowing that person into your space. I know at my hospital we were allowed to have a doula, but I know some hospitals right now, such as Kaiser, at least in my area, is not allowing doulas into the space of the birthing person. So I would definitely recommend checking to see if your hospital's procedure on doulas, if that is something important to you as well. I know some hospitals are allowing doulas and some aren't, so definitely check that. Hi. So now I want to talk about birth centers. The advantage of a birth center, at least right now, is they are a lot less restrictive than a hospital. So I know at least around me, all the birth centers are allowing photographers and doulas and just the birth people who you can typically want in that space. I don't think they're allowing visitors just because you're at the birth center for such a short period of time, but I know that they're allowing photographers and I know that they are allowing doulas, at least most of them, and in my area they're just a little bit less restrictive than a hospital. So if that is something that's important to you, that's definitely something worth looking into if you don't want to just do a home birth. Also, I know that birth centers will typically allow you to birth in the tub. So my hospital allowed me to labor in a tub, but they did not allow me to birth in a tub because there's certain licenses, I believe, at least where I live in California, that you need in order to allow the birthing person to birth in a tub. And I know the birth centers around me typically have a license to do that, but the hospitals do not. I think it's just more of a liability that they don't want to take on. So if birthing in a tub or a water birth is important to you, that's definitely something I would ask them as well. I briefly mentioned this earlier, but if you are choosing to birth at a birthing center or choosing to birth at home and you do have complications, there is that aspect of potentially needing to be transferred to a hospital if something does happen to either you or baby. So you just have to take that into consideration. You know, are you going to want to be transferred again if you're way into labor and, you know, for whatever reason there's some complication that doesn't allow you to birth at a birthing center? You will need to be admitted into the labor and delivery unit at a hospital. I had a friend who this happened to recently, and that's why I definitely wanted to bring it up. Birth centers are amazing and incredible and fully capable of handling a lot of just different things that could come up, but at the end of the day, your life, if they don't think that they can handle something, they are going to transfer you to a hospital, which I think is a great thing, and they should do that, but also take that into consideration. You're not at a hospital. You are with birth workers and birth professionals, but if something happens that's out of their hands, they are going to need to transfer you, and you may not want to be transferred if you're like 8 centimeters dilated and like baby's like 30 minutes away from coming out. It may just be very uncomfortable. Okay, this little man wanted to be a part of the action. He's like, excuse me, you're not paying attention to me. So he's just gonna hang out here. But a disadvantage of a home birth that I would say is that birth is messy. Careful, little man. Birth is messy. You know, there's blood a lot of the times everywhere, and there's just bodily fluids and just stuff happening all over the place. If you're at a hospital or a birth center, they are very good about cleaning all of that up as you go. If you are at home, I'm not saying that they won't do that, that your midwife won't do that, but also remember it is your home. You know, if you start bleeding a lot, I know I had a lot of blood loss and there was blood like on the floor and like all over the bed. after I delivered, and I know they had a specific cleaning person come in and clean up afterwards, not just the nurses. So just something to think about if you are choosing to birth at home, is that it is probably going to be messy, and who's going to clean up that mess. Most of the time your midwife, if you're choosing to hire one, will clean up after the mess, and your doula can help as well, but that's definitely something I would communicate with them, because the last thing you want is a newborn baby and having to clean up literally your entire birth mess if they're not going to. So definitely have that conversation with them and kind of figure out what the game plan is for that. Also, a disadvantage I would say of birthing at home is that if you're at home, most of the time you're going to be birthing with a midwife and a doula. That's typically like the basic scenario, and I know a lot of times people will have a little bit more difficulty or challenges with getting insurance to pay the midwife and just that whole process. So once again, just check your insurance company, clarify with them if they will cover that. If that is a concern for you, you can always just pay your midwife and doula out of pocket, but if insurance is something that you're planning on going through, definitely check with them before you decide to have a home birth. And like I mentioned briefly before when I was talking about hospitals too, just talk to your midwife if you are choosing to birth at home, and make sure that you know what they're going to be testing you and baby for, just to make sure you guys are all healthy and all good to go. Yes, he says yes. Just make sure you have that conversation with them, just because at the end of the day, you know, we want mom to be healthy, we want baby to be healthy, and we want you to have an amazing, beautiful birth experience. But just talk to them and just clarify, like, hey, what are you going to be testing for? If they're going to be, you know, fetal monitoring, if they're going to be monitoring your heart rate, baby's heart rate, if they're going to be checking on your pre-existing conditions, if you do have any. Again, just have that conversation with them. Most of the time, most midwives are absolutely amazing. I love my team of midwives, and this goes for even if you have an OB. Just communicate with them and figure out what they're going to be checking for throughout the entire labor and delivery and postpartum process. I know hospitals have standard procedures, so once again, just talk to your midwife and figure out what his or her standard procedures are. His, her, or they, I'm sorry. Also, I just wanted to talk about the advantages of all of them, and I wanted to just empower you in your birthing process, is that you are the customer. You are paying the hospital, you are paying the birthing center, you are paying the midwife. And there's a saying that the customer is always right. Some people don't believe in that saying, whatever. But at the end of the day, like, if you want to put up affirmations on the wall, if you want to diffuse essential oils, if you want to do certain things to make your environment more comfortable, you can do those things. I haven't heard of any places doing that. Some nurses may pressure you, say, hey, no, you can't do that or whatever. But just know your rights, know what you can and can't do at your hospital, and fight for the birth experience that you want. You know, if you want something, communicate that and make sure that happens. And just give you this acronym. It was something that was given to me and my birthing process, and definitely helped us make decisions, especially when this little man was going to go into the NICU. And it is an acronym of brains. So B is the benefits, R is the risks, A is the alternative, I is intuition, and N is nothing. So kind of just, if you come up with any process or any complications or anything that's just going to feel like, hey, do you want to do this or this, just go through that checklist. So BRAINS, I'll see if I can add it here. I'm not that good at editing yet. B is benefits. So, you know, you can always ask the question, okay, like, what are the benefits of doing this? So I know that they will offer certain like shots or creams or whatever to baby. You can say, okay, what are the benefits? So what's B? R is the risks. Hey, what are the risks if we do this? A, alternative. What are the alternatives if we don't want to do this? I, intuition. Always listen to your gut. That's one of the most powerful tools that we have. And mom's intuition is seriously so real. And N is nothing. What would happen if we do absolutely nothing? And use that acronym. I would definitely suggest that and encourage you to use that acronym when you're making decisions, or if things come up in your birth process. You know, definitely use that to just weigh the pros and cons of everything. that is all for our birth video of just a birth center, a hospital, and a home birth, pros and cons of each of those. If you like this video, I would love it if you would subscribe to this video. That would help me out so much. If you could give it a thumbs up and comment down below what your birth plan is, I'd love to interact with you and talk to you about your birth plan. So definitely do that. And I hope you have a great day. Thanks for watching. Also, you guys, I did have a fully unmedicated birth, so if you want to check out that video, I will leave it down in the description box below, so you can definitely check that out if you want to hear the rest of my birth story. Also, you guys, I did have a fully unmedicated birth, so if you want to check out that video, I will leave it down in the description box below, so you can definitely check that out if you want to hear the rest of my birth story.